They say you never know you're in the good old days until you've actually left them. But if you grew up in Britain between 1990 and 1999, you belong to a very specific, very strange club. We were the bridge generation. We were the last humans on Earth to experience a childhood that was completely analogue and an adolescence that was violently digital. We are the only ones who know what it's like to have our hearts broken by a landline busy tone, and then just a few years later by a vague MSN Messenger status. Today, I'm not just going to list the toys we played with. Anyone can do that. I want to take you back to the feeling. The texture of the boredom on a rainy Sunday, the specific smell of a rented VHS tape case, the financial anxiety of a 10-pence text message. From the tragedy of the Woolworths pick and mix to the illicit underground economy of the school playground, these are the things we lost and the bittersweet reality of growing up in 90s Britain. If I had to summarise the British 90s in one word, it wouldn't be Spice Girls or Oasis. It would be waiting. We didn't have on demand. We had good luck. And nothing taught us patience or absolute rage, quite like the Sunday evening top 40. You have to remember the economics of the time. Back then, a CD album cost about £14.99. That was roughly 3 weeks of paper-round money, assuming you didn't get mugged for your bike or spend it all on Freddos. So we didn't buy music, we stole it from the radio. But this was a military operation. You sat there on your bedroom floor, staring at your double cassette deck, finger hovering over the record and play buttons simultaneously, the sniper position. You had to anticipate the exact millisecond the song started. But the true enemy wasn't the technology, it was the DJ. Mark Goodyear and Bruno Brooks were the villains of our childhood. I swear they knew what we were doing. They would talk over the entire intro, rambling about a competition winner from Leeds, right up until the vocals started. It was psychological warfare. You'd end up with a mixtape where every single song started with, "and here's the next," followed by a harsh click. And when you played that tape too many times, it rebelled. The tape deck would chew it up, a horrific crunching sound like a robot eating spaghetti. Today, a corrupted file is just gone, but back then we performed surgery. You'd grab a standard HB pencil, the greatest repair tool known to man, stick it in the spool, and manually wind the magnetic tape back in. It required the delicate touch of a bomb disposal expert. One wrong move, one crinkle in the tape, and your recording of Gangster's Paradise would have a wobble in it forever. But waiting wasn't just for music, it was for information. Before the internet was in our pockets, we had the internet on our TV. It was called teletext, or Ceefax. Younger viewers will look at archive footage of this and will see a broken spreadsheet. We saw a gateway to the world, but it was a test of faith. You'd type in page 302 for the football scores, and then you wait. The page numbers in the corner would cycle 300, 301, and then suddenly jump to 303. It skipped it. You missed the cycle. Now you have to wait another 45 seconds for it to come back around, staring at a blocky screen just to see if your team had equalized. And let's not forget Bamboozle on Channel 4. It was a quiz game played with the coloured fast text buttons on your remote, red, green, yellow, blue. It was agonizingly slow. You'd press red to answer a question and sit there in silence for half a minute, praying the page would load, just to be told bad luck by a pixelated clown.
We didn't have Google. If you wanted to know if a rumor was true, like if playing the new Beatles track backwards revealed a satanic message, or if Marilyn Manson actually removed his ribs, you couldn't check. You just had to debate it in the school playground for 6 months until someone's older brother confirmed it. We lived in a state of permanent low-level mystery. And honestly, looking back, that mystery made everything feel a little bit more magical. If the living room was our command center, the high street was our battlefield. Today, shopping is a solitary act of clicking a button and waiting for a van to arrive. But in the 90s, it was a pilgrimage, and no temple was more sacred than Woolworths. Woolworths was a confused shop. It sold garden furniture, Lady Diana commemorative plates, and school uniforms all in the same aisle. But we didn't go there for that. We went for the pick and mix. This wasn't just buying sweets, it was a lesson in civil engineering and structural integrity. You had a cup and you had a fixed price. The challenge was simple. How much sugar can you physically compress into this cardboard cylinder before the laws of physics intervene? We developed complex strategies. You put the heavy, dense fudge and chocolate Brazils at the bottom to create a solid foundation. Then you filled the gaps with Smarties, like pouring cement into a brick wall. Finally, you topped it off with the light, airy foam bananas and flying saucers. The rule was, if the lid stayed on for more than 3 seconds while you paid, it was legal. Of course, half the time the sweets at the bottom of the bin had fused together into a single sticky geological formation, but we ate them anyway. Then there was the Friday night ritual. Blockbuster video. The smell of a Blockbuster store is something that science should try to bottle. It was a mix of stale carpet, warm plastic, and the faint aroma of salty popcorn. You have to understand, we didn't have algorithms to tell us what to watch. We had to judge a movie entirely by its cover art and the 3 sentences on the back. The stakes were incredibly high. If you picked a bad movie, that was your weekend ruined. You couldn't just click back and choose something else. You had paid £3.50 for this, and you were going to watch Spy Kids, whether you enjoyed it or not. But the real heartbreak was the new releases wall. You'd walk in, hoping to rent The Matrix or Titanic. You'd scan the shelf, looking for the box, and you'd see it, row after row of empty cases, every single copy rented out. You would stand there, holding the empty display box, staring at the space behind it where the tape should be, feeling a deep, existential hollowness. In the end, you'd settle for a straight-to-DVD Steven Seagal movie just to have something to put in the machine. And God help you if you forgot to rewind the tape before returning it. Be kind, rewind wasn't just a slogan, it was a moral imperative. If Blockbuster was for entertainment, Argos was for dreams. The Argos catalogue, the laminated book of dreams, was our Amazon. It was 1,000 pages thick and lived under the coffee table, or more likely, in the bathroom.
Shopping at Argos was a unique bureaucratic nightmare that we all accepted as normal. You didn't browse shelves, you browsed the book, found what you wanted, and then walked to the store. There, you had to find those tiny blue ballpoint pens, which were always chewed at the end or completely out of ink, and write the catalogue number onto a little slip of paper. It felt less like shopping and more like filling out a betting slip at the races. You'd take your slip to the till, pay, and then join the herd of people standing in the collection area, staring up at the electronic screens. Order number 492 to collection point B. It was the most suspenseful moment of the week. You'd watch the conveyor belt roll out from the mysterious warehouse in the back, praying your item was on it. Sometimes a staff member would walk out empty-handed and just shake their head at you. Out of stock, love. It was devastating. And speaking of waiting, we need to talk about photography. In the age of the smartphone, we take 50 photos of our lunch, pick the best one, add a filter, and post it instantly. In the 90s, photography was a gamble.
You had a camera with a roll of film that had 24 exposures. That was it. You had 24 shots for your entire 2-week holiday. You couldn't check if you blinked. You couldn't check if your thumb was over the lens. You just had to hope. When you got home, you took the film to Boots or Snappy Snaps and paid a fortune to have it developed. Then you had to wait 3 days or pay extra for the 1-hour service if you were feeling wealthy. The moment of truth came when you opened that paper wallet. Usually 12 of the photos were blurry, 6 were just pictures of the floor where the camera went off in your bag, and the ones that were technically focused had a little sticker on them that said "Subject Too Dark" or "Red Eye." We paid money for pictures of our own failures, but when you got that one perfect photo, it was a masterpiece. If the high street was where we spent money, the school playground was where we learned how to make it. The 90s playground was a lawless, deregulated economy that would make Wall Street look stable. We didn't deal in stocks and shares, we dealt in stickers, pogs, and Pokémon cards. The most common phrase heard in a British school between 1996 and 1999 was got, need. Panini football stickers were the gateway drug. You'd buy a packet with your lunch money, tearing the foil open with trembling hands. But the cruelty of the system was the shiny. If you had a shiny Alan Shearer or a shiny Manchester United crest, you were royalty. If you had 5 spare Gary Pallisters, you were bankrupt. The exchange rates were brutal. One shiny was worth at least 10 swapsies. And there was always one kid who claimed his uncle worked at the sticker factory and could get you the entire Premier League team for a Mars bar. He was lying, of course. Then came Pokémon cards. This was when things got serious. Schools actually had to ban them because fights were breaking out over Charizard. A holographic Charizard was worth more to a 10-year-old than a car. I remember seeing a boy cry because he accidentally put his trousers in the wash with a shiny Blastoise in the pocket. It came out looking like wet papier-mâché. It was a tragedy on par with Shakespeare. But if trading cards taught us economics, Tamagotchis taught us about mortality.
We begged our parents for these little egg-shaped keychains. We thought they were cute pets. We were wrong. They were needy, demanding digital tyrants. A Tamagotchi didn't care that you were in a maths lesson. It would start beeping for food right in the middle of a silence. The stress was real. You'd have to try and feed it under the desk without the teacher seeing. If you got caught, the teacher would confiscate it. And that was a death sentence. You would sit there for the next 6 hours, sweating, knowing that your digital pet was slowly dying in the teacher's drawer, surrounded by its own digital poo. Coming home to find that little gravestone on the screen was our generation's first real experience of grief. When we weren't stressing over pixelated chickens, we were trying to survive the physical dangers of the playground. Health and safety hadn't really been invented yet. We played games that were essentially sanctioned violence. The king of these was British Bulldog. The rules were simple. One person stands in the middle and everyone else has to run across the playground without getting caught. But caught usually meant being tackled into the concrete with the force of a rugby player. It was brutal. Trousers were torn, knees were scraped, and dignity was lost. Eventually every school in the country banned it, so we just changed the name to something else and kept playing until someone broke an arm. And finally, the social climax of the year, the school disco. Nothing captures the awkwardness of being British quite like a 90s school disco. It was usually held in the gym, which still smelled faintly of old plimsolls. The DJ was often a geography teacher who had brought his own CD player. The room was always divided like a war zone. Boys on one side, sliding across the floor on their knees in their best polyester trousers. Girls on the other side, dancing in a circle around their handbags. The gap in the middle was no man's land. We would spend 2 hours drinking endless cups of cheap, diluted orange squash and eating hula hoops, waiting for the slow dance. When the DJ finally played My Heart Will Go On or Angels by Robbie Williams, the panic set in.
You had about 30 seconds to walk across the room and ask someone to dance. The rejection was public and devastating, but if they said yes, you would stand there, arms rigidly extended, swaying back and forth like two trees in a breeze, trying desperately not to make eye contact, praying for the song to end. We often talk about the 90s as a simpler time, but technically speaking, it was incredibly stressful. We were the beta testers for the digital revolution. Nothing worked properly, everything was expensive, and if you wanted to play a video game, you often had to perform a lung capacity test first. Gaming in the 90s was defined by a strict hierarchy, specifically known as the Player 2 syndrome. If you were the older sibling, you got the official controller, the sleek ergonomic pad that came with the console. If you were the younger sibling or the guest, you got the other one.
Usually made by a third-party company like Mad Catz, the Player 2 controller was a monstrosity. It was too big for human hands, the buttons stuck, and the turbo switch didn't work. It was usually transparent, so you could see the cheap electronics failing inside. Losing a match of GoldenEye or Mario Kart wasn't a reflection of your skill, it was a hardware disadvantage. And when the games didn't load, we all became engineers. Every child in 90s Britain knew the universal fix for a Nintendo or Sega cartridge. You took it out, blew into the bottom of it as hard as you could, and slammed it back in. Nintendo explicitly told us not to do this. They said the moisture from our breath would corrode the contacts. We didn't care. We blew into those cartridges like we were playing a trumpet, and 9 times out of 10, it worked. It was magic over science. Then the internet arrived. But it didn't arrive quietly. It screamed. Connecting to the internet in the late 90s sounded like 2 fax machines fighting to the death. Be-do-be-sure. It was the sound of the future. But getting online was a high-stakes negotiation with your family, because you couldn't use the phone and the internet at the same time. You had to scream downstairs, "Mum, get off the phone! I need to check my emails." You didn't have any emails. You just wanted to look at a fan site for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Loading a web page took about 2 minutes. If there was a picture, it loaded line by line, from top to bottom. It was agonizing. You'd sit there watching a grey bar slowly reveal a photo of Jennifer Aniston, praying that your mum wouldn't pick up the phone in the kitchen and sever the connection instantly. And the cost. My God, the cost. Internet wasn't a flat monthly fee. It was charged by the minute, like a phone call. The fear of the monthly itemized bill landing on the doormat was a terror that today's generation will never understand. When we finally went mobile, it wasn't much cheaper. The Nokia 3310 is a legend for a reason. You could drop it down a flight of stairs and it would just break the floor. The battery lasted for a week, but we didn't use it for calling. We used it for Snake and for texting. But SMS was a luxury. A single text message cost 10 pence, and you only had 160 characters. This is why we invented TextSpeak. We didn't write CULTR because we were lazy. We wrote it because we were poor. Every character had a monetary value. You had to craft your message like a haiku. You couldn't waste space on vowels or punctuation. Sending a text that spilled over into 2 messages, costing 20p, was a financial disaster. Finally, as the decade closed, we started burning CDs. We felt like pirates. We were creating our own albums. But CD burners were temperamental beasts. You'd spend 45 minutes burning a Summer Mix 99, staring at the progress bar. 95%, 96%, 98%, and then error, buffer underrun. The disc was ruined. It was now a shiny coaster. There are probably landfills in the UK filled entirely with failed CDRs from 1998, a monument to our ambition exceeding our hardware. As we reached the turn of the millennium, the world started to speed up. And in that acceleration, we lost some things that were less tangible than a Tamagotchi or a cassette tape. We lost a certain way of living.
We lost the art of getting lost.
In the 90s, every car had an A to Z map book in the passenger door pocket. It was usually dog-eared, torn, and 3 years out of date. Navigating wasn't a blue line on a screen. It was a screaming match between your mum and dad on a B road in the middle of nowhere. "You missed the turn, Gary." "I didn't miss it. The map is wrong." But there was something about that uncertainty. You had to look at road signs. You had to wind down the window and ask a stranger for directions. Today, we can't get lost even if we try. We are permanent blue dots on a satellite grid. We traded adventure for efficiency. We lost the freedom of being unreachable. This is the big one. When you left the house in 1995, you vanished. Unless you had 10 pence for a phone box, nobody could find you. You were off the grid. If you said you were going to the park, you went to the park, and for 3 hours, you were your own master. There was no read receipt. There was no last seen at 14:02. There was just you and the world. We didn't realize it at the time, but that silence, that lack of constant digital noise was the ultimate luxury. We lost the shared experience. TV was linear. There were 4 channels, maybe 5 if you were lucky enough to get channel 5 without it looking like a snowstorm. This meant we all watched the same things at the same time. The Big Breakfast, Top of the Pops, Gladiators. If you missed the episode of Friends on Friday night, you couldn't stream it on Saturday, you missed it. You were socially excluded from the conversation at school on Monday morning. It created a sense of urgency. We gathered around the TV like a campfire. We sat through the adverts because we had no choice. We experienced culture together, in real time, as a nation. And finally, we lost boredom. I know that sounds strange. Who wants to be bored? But 90s boredom was deep. Rainy, Sunday afternoon boredom. Staring out of the window, counting raindrops, reading the back of a cereal packet for the 100th time. But that boredom was fertile. Because we were bored, we invented games. We made up stories. We built dens out of sofa cushions. We daydreamed. Today, the second we feel a tiny twinge of boredom, we pull out a phone and scroll. We've killed the empty spaces where imagination used to live. So, was it better? We had slow internet, scratched CDs, and dangerous playgrounds. We had bad hair, worse fashion, and food that was mostly beige. But we also had mystery. We had anticipation. We had the thrill of the unknown. We are the bridge generation. We are the only ones who remember what life was like before the world turned into data. We have a foot in both camps. We can use an iPhone, but we can also rewire a plug and fix a cassette tape with a pencil. And that, I think, makes us pretty lucky. We were the last to really live in the moment, simply because we had nowhere else to post it. If this trip down memory lane sparked a little flicker of nostalgia in your analogue heart, please do subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Tell me which shiny sticker you never managed to find, or which level of Sonic the Hedgehog broke your spirit. Thanks for watching. I'm off to return some videotapes before I get a fine.